Everyone was laughing. And then she said I was bankrupt. She didn't shout it, she didn't even raise her voice. She said it like it was fact, like the weather. Like I'd just lost everything and needed a place to sleep. And the worst part, they believed her. For 2 seconds, I just stood there smiling, holding a plate of ribs. Someone handed me the smell of grilled corn thick in the air. And then silence. All eyes on me. My cousin's fork hovered midair. My aunt's fake laugh froze in her throat. Even the children stopped running. That's how it happens, isn't it? Not with a slap. Not with a scream, but with a sentence you can't take back. Vanessa smiled and lifted her glass. To family, she said. Especially those of us going through transitions. I should have walked away. But I didn't. I stood there. I let it happen. My name. My work. My dignity reduced to a party anecdote. She made sure to add how she'd offered me her spare room, how she'd reached out to a few places that might be hiring, how we all need a little help sometimes. The voice of a generous sister. The face of a monster. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Not yet. Because what she didn't know, what no one knew, was that 24 hours from now I'd be holding the keys to her dream house, and the deed would have my name on it. It wasn't the first time she'd humiliated me in public. But this was the first time she'd done it with a microphone in her hand and an entire family as her audience. Vanessa had always known how to perform. Her stage today, my parents' backyard. Red, white, and blue balloons swayed above paper tablecloths. Aunt Cheryl's potato salad sweating under the sun, plastic forks scraping at the bottom of the mac and cheese tray. And in the middle of it all, my sister standing tall in her sleeveless linen dress and wedge heels, waving her glass like she was announcing an engagement. Only instead of love, she dropped shame. She didn't want me to say anything, she added, hand to her heart. But I couldn't just stay quiet. Brooke's too proud to ask for help, and honestly, she needs it right now. People looked at me with a kind of sympathy I didn't ask for. The kind that burns worse than judgment. I caught my dad's expression, confused, half embarrassed, shifting from me to her, back to his plate. My mom blinked fast like she was trying to piece it all together but didn't want to cause a scene. That's always been her way. And then there was Lena. She stood frozen by the drink table, one hand wrapped around a red Solo cup, the other clenching her phone. Her eyes found mine. No words. Just a slow shake of her head. That was the moment I realized something cruel. Vanessa didn't just want attention. She wanted my erasure. She wanted to be the successful one. The savior. The sister who stepped up when Brooke couldn't stand on her own. But I was standing. I had been for years, and what she couldn't stand was that I never needed her help to begin with. I placed my plate down untouched. She's being modest, Vanessa said, voice syrupy. She filed just last month, but you know Brooke always acting like everything's fine. Strong, silent type. Chuckles rippled through the tent. A few forced, a few genuine. People love a downfall when it isn't theirs. I even told her she could move in with me until things stabilize, she continued. It's what sisters do, right? I stared at her. Not with anger. With precision. Vanessa had rehearsed this. Every sentence was a needle, every pause a trap. And everyone was too polite or too spineless to call it out. Uncle Daniel cleared his throat. Loud. Deliberate. Is that your news, Ness? He asked. Feels like maybe Brooke should be the one sharing. She laughed. Oh, come on, Uncle D. I'm just helping keep the family looped in. That's what this is all about, isn't it? Staying close. Lena took a step forward. Her mouth opened, then closed. She didn't say it, but I could see it in her eyes. You don't owe them anything. She was right. I didn't owe them a rebuttal. I didn't owe Vanessa a performance. All I owed myself was the satisfaction of knowing something she didn't. My phone buzzed in my clutch. Once. Then again. I excused myself without a word. No drama, no tears. Just the soft scrape of my chair against the patio floor, and the quiet click of my sandals walking away. Inside the house, the air was cooler. Quieter. I walked past the hallway photos, School portraits, Christmas mornings, the kind of curated nostalgia that never told the full story. The kitchen smelled like lemonade and melted butter. Outside, her voice still floated through the open windows. She's just been so overwhelmed. You know Brooke, she bottles things up. She's always been private. I opened my clutch with steady fingers. One new text. Realtor, 2:46 p.m. offer accepted. Closing confirmed for tomorrow 9 a.m. Congrats. I stared at the screen. Then I smiled. Not the smile you give at parties. Not the one you wear for photos. No, this was smaller. Sharper. Like the clean slice of a ribbon right before a grand opening. Vanessa didn't know. No one knew. That while she was busy announcing my ruin, I had quietly bought her dream. Her house. The one with the wraparound porch and ivy along the fence. The one she'd posted about on Instagram with the caption someday. Tomorrow that deed would have my name. Not hers. I slid the phone back into my bag. Took a sip from a half-empty water glass on the counter. The citrus bite of old lemon made me wince, but I didn't stop. Outside, a laugh. A clink of a fork on glass. Someone started a second round of stories. I stood there for another beat, not hiding, just letting the moment settle inside me like a tide changing direction. I stepped back outside. The sun had shifted. Shadows stretched longer across the grass. Someone had brought out popsicles for the kids. No one noticed my return, not at first. Not until I reached the drink station and picked up a glass of water. Then eyes found me again. But I wasn't their pity story anymore. I wasn't shrinking. I was watching. Vanessa was still in full flight now, recounting a story from our college years, the kind that conveniently left out her betrayals. I walked past her. Not fast, not slow. I placed my hand lightly on our mother's shoulder. I'm going to head out early, I said. Long day tomorrow. Mom blinked. Everything all right, I nodded once. Better than she thinks. And then I looked at Vanessa. Right in the eyes. That bankruptcy thing I said loud enough for just our table. Not quite true. She opened her mouth, but I was already walking away. Not storming off. Not slamming doors. Just exiting. With the kind of grace that leaves people wondering what they missed. Because they did miss something. They missed the quiet win. The one happening tomorrow. At 9 a.m. With paperwork, a pen, and a house that no longer belonged to Vanessa's fantasy but to my reality. Would I confront her, ruin her little show with the truth, or would I wait? And let her feel it when the walls start closing in? Would you confront your sister right there or wait for your turn? It didn't start with bankruptcy. It started with a 4th grade science fair. I was 9. I spent 2 weeks building a terrarium out of an old fish tank, gravel, moss, and miniature ferns I clipped from the neighbor's yard. I even made tiny signs for the nitrogen cycle. I labeled everything. I stayed up late using my dad's flashlight under a blanket, double-checking evaporation and condensation arrows. Vanessa waltzed in the morning of the fair, hair still wet from her shower, and told Mrs. Collier we made it together. I asked. She smiled. I helped pick the moss. Remember, I stood there, mouth half open, as our teacher nodded with approval. We won 2nd place. And at dinner that night, my parents congratulated her for being such a team player. That was the beginning. After that came the tutoring incident. I had an SAT prep session scheduled at 4 p.m. Vanessa forgot hers was at 3 p.m. and didn't show. When she showed up late, she cried in front of the instructor, said she was overwhelmed, begged him to switch. He gave her my time. I sat in the waiting room until 5 p.m. No one ever asked why. In college, I worked 2 jobs, one as a library aide, one as a late shift receptionist at a dentist's office. Vanessa dropped out after 1 semester, said college wasn't her thing, and somehow that made her brave. She's just figuring herself out, Mom said. And Brooke, Dad added, is our steady one. No drama. But I wasn't steady. I was exhausted. And invisible. Vanessa could cry once and change the whole conversation. I could bleed quietly for months and still be asked to smile for the camera. After college, I rented a studio apartment above a laundromat. It smelled like detergent and burnt toast. I didn't complain. I built my business from the corner of that studio, designing home goods with recycled materials. Tea towels, soy candles, simple, sturdy things. I packed every box myself, stamped each return label, wrote handwritten thank you notes for every order. When I launched the website, Vanessa said, "Oh, that's cute." Like Etsy, she just quit her third job that year, this time at a boutique that didn't appreciate her energy. At family dinners, she talked about exciting real estate leads. And when I mentioned crossing 10,000 orders, Mom asked if I was eating well. At Thanksgiving, Vanessa showed up in a rented SUV wearing sunglasses indoors, arms full of store-bought pies. Everyone applauded. "I'm trying," she said, with a shrug. "Just figuring out what fits, you know." She always said that, just figuring it out, and somehow they kept clapping. Meanwhile, I made the entire meal that year. Turkey, 3 sides, 2 pies from scratch. When it came time for the toast, Mom turned to me and said gently, "Let Vanessa speak." It's been a hard year for her. I poured myself a glass of wine and nodded. I didn't argue. But the wine tasted like metal. And I could hear the click of the trophy case in the hallway, Vanessa's old medals still hanging, my name nowhere in sight. That night, I scrubbed gravy from the casserole dish alone while Vanessa laughed in the living room. She told a story about college that never happened. Everyone listened. I never got into debt. Not because I was brilliant, just because I was scared. Scared of slipping. Of proving them right. Of giving them one more reason to say, "Well, Vanessa's always been the bold one." Vanessa racked up store credit at every place that offered 15% off. Nordstrom, Anthropologie, Sephora. She moved into a luxury condo she couldn't afford, called it manifesting abundance. I rented a 1-bedroom walk-up with thin walls and thicker goals. I reinvested every dollar. New packaging. Wholesale partnerships. Farmers markets. She got matching luggage for a trip she never took. I got 5 hours of sleep a night. And still every family gathering sounded the same. "She's just got such energy," Dad would say, watching Vanessa retell a story from her latest job. "She's out there trying," Mom added. "That takes courage." They called it bravery. They called it sparkle. They never called it what it was. Avoidance. Escape. Performance. Meanwhile, I hit 6 figures in revenue. Then 7. I didn't tell them. When I finally got invited to speak at a small business summit in Boston, Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Cute little panel thing," she asked. "I love that for you." I nodded. And printed her words in the margins of my keynote notes just to remind myself what silence had cost. Because in my family, the loud one always won. Even when she was wrong. Even when she had nothing but glitter and receipts. And I had balance sheets. But no applause. Thanksgiving 2 years ago, my dining room table seated 12. I had borrowed extra chairs from the neighbors, pressed napkins by hand, roasted 2 turkeys because Mom always liked just in case. I made rosemary stuffing, caramelized Brussels sprouts, fresh cranberry relish. Everything from scratch. Every pan in my kitchen used. Vanessa showed up 40 minutes late in suede heels, holding a single scented candle. "It's harvest spice," she said, presenting it like a trophy. I thought it fit the mood. Everyone cooed. She hadn't cooked. She hadn't offered. She hadn't asked. After the plates were cleared, Mom tapped her glass. We all turned, waiting. "I think," she said gently, "Vanessa should do the toast this year." I blinked. The words didn't land all at once. I'd assumed stupidly that hosting meant I'd speak, that the person who woke up at 5 a.m. to peel potatoes had earned the right to say thank you. But Mom looked at me and added, "Brooke, you don't mind, do you? Your sisters had a hard season." Vanessa was already standing, already holding her wine glass. "Of course not," I said. What else could I say? I watched her raise her glass and talk about resilience and family roots and learning to forgive ourselves. People nodded like it was gospel. I sipped my wine and smiled. And tasted the same metallic bitterness I'd first known in 4th grade. After dinner I washed the dishes. No one offered to help. Vanessa had gone out back with a glass of Pinot and an Instagram story captioned, "Thankful, full, and healing." The water was too hot. My sleeves were soaked, but I didn't mind the burn. Sometimes it was the only thing that reminded me I was real. The house was quiet except for the hum of the dishwasher and the clink of a fork left behind. I looked up at the kitchen shelf. A row of ceramic mugs from my store still wrapped in plastic never used. "Don't want to ruin them," Mom had said when I first brought them. I'd made them by hand. Vanessa had once spilled coffee on a $300 rug and was called adorably clumsy. That night, I sat alone on the back steps looking at the moonlit driveway. Something in me went still. Not angry, not bitter. Just finished. I realized it wasn't about the terrarium, or the tutor, or even the toast. It was about being the one who always had to hold the silence. The one who swallowed things whole so others could shine. They didn't see me. Not really, and maybe they never would. If your family always believed the liar, would you stay or leave for good? She called it her dream home. I called it leverage. Summer 2021, Lake Sunapee. Vanessa found the listing on her phone before we even arrived, kept flashing the screen to everyone in the car like it was a lottery ticket. "It has a dock," she said breathlessly, "and those wraparound porches. You guys. Manifesting is real." She said that a lot. Manifesting, as if vision boards were currency and debt didn't count. We pulled up to the open house. White shutters, gray shingles, flowers in hanging baskets. A soft breeze came off the water and lifted her hair just right. Of course she posed. She twirled in front of the porch. Told the agent she could already see herself hosting wine nights. She took photos on the staircase in front of the fireplace barefoot on the dock. Posted them later with the caption, "Future me vibes." I was there too. But no one tagged me. Inside, I counted outlets, tested faucets, checked under the sink for leaks. Old habits. Vanessa floated room to room like she already owned the air inside. She didn't have the down payment. She didn't have the credit. But she had the want, and in our family that always seemed to be enough. I remember her standing by the lake holding a glass of store-bought rosé in a plastic cup. "I can feel it," she whispered. "This house wants me." I looked at the dock pilings half-rotted under the waterline. And I didn't say a word. It showed up on my feed by accident. Or maybe not. Zillow listing. Charming 4BR waterfront home motivated seller. Divorce finalized. Price dropped. I didn't click it at first, just stared at the thumbnail. The porch, the dock. The window seat where Vanessa once said, "This is where I'll write my memoir." I refreshed the page. Still available, 3 days on market. I closed my laptop, made coffee, and sat in silence. The condensation on my glass left rings on the legal pad in front of me. I didn't wipe them away. There were already notes scribbled across the page. Figures. Options. LLC names. I'd never planned for this, not really, but I had options. More than she ever knew. By lunch I was on the phone with Lena. "You're doing what she asked." "I'm considering it," I said. "I just want to know if it's cruel." "No," she said flatly. "It's too perfect." I could hear her smiling. I leaned back looking at the printouts spread across my table. Title search. Property history. Bank owned until recently. Divorce court documents sealed. Vanessa would have no clue. She hadn't mentioned the house in over a year. She'd moved on to a beach condo fantasy in Santa Barbara. But I remembered. I remembered every photo. Every caption. Every time she used that porch like it was already hers. The house never wanted her. She just wanted the applause that came with pretending. The voice on the other end of the line was calm, clipped. "Yes, we can structure the purchase through a single-member LLC," the realtor said. "All public records will show ownership under the business name." I wrote it down. Waverly Field Properties LLC. Clean. Anonymous. No paper trail that would lead to me, not unless you knew where to look. He asked if I'd like to schedule a viewing. I declined. I've seen it before. Silence. Then a brief, polite laugh. Of course. Inspection report is attached to the email. I hung up and looked at the stack of printouts again. Bank statements, IRA withdrawal forms. One post-it note, $950 000 wire transfer window 8:45 to 9:15 a.m. I knew the risks. Tapping long-term savings, incurring capital gains. Vanessa would never understand that part. She didn't live in numbers. She lived in sparkle and sound bites, but this wasn't about hurting her. Not really. It was about ending something. Or maybe reclaiming what I was never allowed to have: visibility. Power, proof, not to show off, but to stop disappearing. I picked up the notarized LLC paperwork. The ink had barely dried. The printer buzzed again, final confirmation forms. I stapled them one by one, methodical, quiet. The closing date was confirmed. Tomorrow, 9:00 a.m. The morning after the reunion. The wire room was quiet. Too quiet, no background music, no waiting line. Just the steady rhythm of forms, screens, verifications. Final confirmation, the banker said. Are you ready to proceed? I nodded. My hand didn't shake as I signed. I had practiced this signature on thousands of invoices before, but this one felt different. The transfer screen blinked once, twice. Then the green checkmark appeared. Funds sent $950. Oh. Receiver Waverly Field Properties LLC. Closing scheduled the 8th of July 9:00 a.m. No confetti. No applause. Just a manila envelope and a thank you nod. I stepped out into the parking lot. The pavement radiated heat. A gust of summer wind tossed my hair sideways. I stood there in my low heels and linen blouse, watching people rush past with iced coffee and errands. None of them knew. Not one. Not the woman who cut me off leaving the lot. Not the couple arguing about peach versus cherry pie for their barbecue. And definitely not Vanessa. She'd still be scrolling. Still performing. Still believing the world owed her the dream because she'd once spoken it aloud. I got into my car, closed the door, rolled down the window halfway. Let the air in. This isn't revenge, I said quietly. No one around to hear it. It's reclamation. That night, I sat at my dining table with the same glass of rosé she once held. Except mine was real, dry, crisp, no filters. The folder lay open in front of me. Deed copies. Property tax projections. A set of brass keys in a zippered envelope. I picked them up. Felt their weight. 3 summers ago, I had watched her prance barefoot on that dock, glass, raised lips parted in a soft, curated smile. She'd begged me to take candids for her stories. You always get the angles right, she'd said. I never posted them. But I kept one. Just one photo. Tucked behind my insurance papers. In it, she's spinning in front of the lake, house, arms wide, hair glowing like some sponsored goddess. But if you zoom in just a little, you can see me. In the reflection of the porch door. Sunglasses. Expressionless. Watching. That's the part she never noticed. She was always too busy hearing her own voice. She never once turned around. Now the house was mine. Not because I wanted to live in it, but because it meant something else entirely. It meant I no longer needed her to look back. I had stopped waiting to be seen. I finished the glass. Placed the keys beside my plate. And for the first time in a long, long while, I smiled. Would you spend your savings to prove a point or walk away quietly? She pulled up 10 minutes late, like always. Black SUV. Designer tote. Big sunglasses. Still playing the part. I watched from the porch, swing, coffee in hand. Steam curled from the rim of my mug. The lake behind me didn't ripple. Vanessa stepped out in stilettos. Impractical. Loud against the gravel. A fashion choice meant to say I'm fine. I didn't get up. Brooke, she called like we were back at the reunion. Like nothing had changed. I nodded toward the second cup waiting on the rail. Black coffee. No sugar. Just how she used to take it before she switched to oat milk and affirmations. She looked around, still holding her purse. You didn't text me the address, she said, walking toward the steps. I didn't need to, I replied. Something in her brow twitched, but she smiled. Small talk followed. Something about traffic. Something about how unreal it was to see this place again. I let her talk. She walked toward the swing and froze. I had left the keys on the cushion beside me, heavy brass. Still faintly warm from my hand. She blinked. Are you renting it? She asked. I shook my head once. Then picked up the keys. Held them out like a peace offering. Or a verdict. Recognize this place. Her lips parted. No sound came out. Just the wind behind her. And the faint creak of the dock shifting below. Vanessa didn't take the keys. Her hand hovered for a second, then dropped. She looked around at the porch, the siding, the lake like glass. I don't understand, she said, finally. Why are we here? I sipped my coffee. Let the silence stretch. Then I thought you liked this view. She flinched. Just slightly. She sat not on the swing but on the wooden rail. Like she wasn't sure where she belonged. You always listened when I talked about this house, she said, voice suddenly soft. That summer I thought you got it, how much it meant to me. I nodded. I did get it. She glanced sideways. Her smile cracked. Thin. Tight. But, how did you, after the reunion, I thought you were broke, I finished for her. She didn't answer. Her fingers clenched the railing. I saw the papers, Brooke, she snapped. You filed. It was public. They were contingency drafts, I said calmly. Nothing was submitted. You jumped to conclusions. She blinked fast. So, you're not bankrupt number. But you let everyone think. You let them think, I said, meeting her eyes. You announced it, toasted it. Like a joke. Her lips pressed into a line. I thought you needed help, she said, quieter now. That's why I said you could stay, you humiliated me, I cut in flat and final. And the wind, as if summoned, moved between us. Lifting the edges of her hair. Stirring the untouched coffee on the rail. Vanessa stood up fast. The swing creaked beside me. You bought it, she said, half whisper, half accusation. You bought this house. I didn't blink. Under Waverly Field Properties, she pressed. That's you, I nodded once. Her mouth opened then closed again. I don't. How? Why? I turned to face her fully. The mug in my hand was warm again. I bought it the day after you announced my bankruptcy, I said. While you were basking in pity. I was signing papers. Her face shifted, confusion bleeding into panic. Then disbelief. You did this to spite me. No, I said, standing. I did this to end the story. What story? The one where I'm always behind. The one where you shine and I shrink. Her eyes glistened. But not from tears. From rage. You know what this looks like, she said, voice rising. It looks petty. Vindictive. Obsessive. No, I said again quietly. It looks final. The breeze moved between us again. She took a step forward, then paused. I dreamed of this porch, she said, voice lower. I told Mom and Dad this was where I'd grow old. Raise my daughter someday. I nodded. I remember. She searched my face for softness. Some trace of the sister who used to let her win. But I wasn't giving her that. Not anymore. Vanessa stepped back onto the porch. Her heels caught slightly in the wood grain, but she didn't seem to notice. I love this house, she said, more to the air than to me. I showed it to everyone. I told them it would be mine someday. She looked at me, eyes glassy, voice brittle. I was the one who saw it first. I didn't respond. Her breath hitched. I stood on this porch 3 summers ago, she went on, and I said, this is it. This is my future. Silence. Only the creak of the dock. The cry of a gull in the distance. It was supposed to be mine, she whispered finally. And there it was. Not pain. Not confusion. Entitlement. I looked at her. Long and clear. Then maybe I said steady and low, you should have worked for it. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. She blinked like I'd slapped her. But I hadn't moved. You don't get it, she spat. You never had to prove anything. You were always the quiet one, the one no one noticed. Exactly, I said. You were too loud to hear what I was building. Her mouth opened, then shut. No comeback, no spin. Just the rustle of pine needles on the porch. And the heat from the mug in my hand. Still warm. Vanessa didn't say goodbye. She didn't slam the door. She didn't cry. She just stood there. Frozen between the swing and the screen door. Between the life she pretended she owned and the one I quietly built while she wasn't looking. I set my mug down on the windowsill, walked past her slowly. Paused at the door. The breeze moved again. Soft. Final. I'll leave the keys here, I said. You can sit a while if you want. Her jaw clenched. But she didn't respond. I didn't expect her to. Inside the house smelled of cedar and lemon oil. Clean. Unclaimed. Mine. I walked to the kitchen. The realtor's folder was still on the counter, signed, sealed, settled. Behind me through the screen I heard nothing. No footsteps. No excuses. No fake laugh. Just the swing. Moving gently. Empty. I poured myself another cup of coffee. Same roast I used to brew when she visited, back when she'd take the last muffin and the credit. Now the silence wrapped around me like a coat. No confetti. No shouting. Just a house that had finally chosen sides. And I didn't need applause. Just peace. Would you have told her sooner or waited until the silence said everything? She didn't cry. But she didn't leave either. The sun had shifted behind the trees, casting long shadows through the living room windows. I sat on the edge of the armchair, mug empty, hands still. Vanessa stood by the fireplace, arms crossed but lower now. Looser. The house made its own sounds. A soft hum from the old fridge. The ticking wall clock above the hallway arch. And silence thick enough to hold. You redecorated, she said finally. I nodded. Neutral tones, clean lines. She gave a small laugh, not bitter. Just tired. I always imagined navy blue walls in here. And velvet. I said nothing. She lowered herself onto the edge of the couch. Not the center, not with ease, like someone unsure if she was welcome. You want me to leave? She asked, looking around, not at me. I shook my head. I want you to understand. More silence. The kind that itches if you're used to filling it. Finally, she looked at me. I'm in debt, Brooke, like real debt. Not just the flashy kind. I waited. My lease is up in 2 weeks. I'm on probation at work. And she swallowed. I told Mom I was thinking of buying a cabin. Because I didn't want to say I had nothing. I didn't move. She exhaled through her nose. It felt good, thinking maybe you were worse off. It made me feel less like a failure. Vanessa leaned back, eyes fixed on a spot between the couch cushions. I watched her pick at a loose thread on her sleeve. Then she said it. So, what now? A pause. You win, I blinked. This isn't a game. Her lips twisted into a crooked smile. Could have fooled me. I stood, walked over to the kitchen counter, refilled my mug. Steam curled up in front of my face, hiding the frown I didn't want her to see. You think this, I gestured slightly, was about revenge? She didn't answer. I sat again. Same calm tone. It wasn't. Then what was it, she asked, her voice low but sharp. Some kind of lesson. I met her eyes. Number. It was peace. For me. That landed. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, face in her hands. Her voice came muffled through her palms. I don't know how to fix this. I nodded slowly. Then let's start with what I need. Not from guilt, just boundaries. She looked up, eyes narrowed with caution, not defiance. I'm listening. I counted them off quietly. 1. You tell the family the truth. About the bankruptcy. About what really happened. Her face didn't flinch. 2. You stop using my name to get anything credit, sympathy, clout. That ends. She nodded barely. And 3, I said, more slowly now, this house. It's not a trophy. It's not a retreat. It's a home. You don't get to assume you're welcome. You earn your way in. She didn't speak right away. But she didn't push back either. Vanessa stared at the floor for a long time. The old pine board stretched between us, wide, imperfect, and honest. She didn't nod right away. She didn't cry or apologize. But eventually she spoke. I can't promise I'll get it all right, she said. Her voice was smaller now. Raw. But I heard you. I exhaled quietly. Not relief. Not forgiveness. Just space. That's all I needed, I said. She looked around the room again. Like she was seeing it differently. Not as a prize, not as an Instagram post, just a room. A home she hadn't built, one she had to knock on, not walk into. I didn't mean for the announcement to go that far, she said, almost to herself. I raised an eyebrow. She caught it. Okay. I meant to embarrass you. But not destroy you. I didn't flinch. You didn't, I said. You just reminded me why I needed out. She rubbed her arms, suddenly aware of the late afternoon chill. The lake outside had gone still again, sunlight low and silver. I used to be jealous of you, she whispered. You were always so calm. Like nothing touched you. I held my mug tighter. It touched me, I said. I just didn't need to prove it. That silence came back heavier but not bitter. Like smoke after a long fire. You never needed to compete with me, I said quietly. My voice didn't shake. Not anymore. You needed to heal. The clock ticked twice. Vanessa didn't respond. She stared straight ahead where the lake shimmered through the wide window panes. Her eyes didn't move, but something behind them did. A shift, a retreat, a quiet collapse. Then, just above a whisper, I heard it. And I needed you to fail. I turned my face slightly. Not shocked, I'd known. But hearing it spoken, not assumed, cut in a clean, sterile way. Like surgical truth, she didn't flinch, she just looked, emptied. I kept thinking if you stumbled, she went on, people would finally stop comparing us. They'd finally say, see, Vanessa's doing okay too. The words hung in the space between us like dust in golden light. I sipped my coffee. Cold now. Didn't matter. I'm not better than you, I said. I just stopped needing approval to feel real. She rubbed at her wrist like it ached. Everything I did. The jobs, the boyfriends, the car, the handbags. It wasn't about me wanting more. It was about making sure you didn't get to shine too bright. I said nothing. There wasn't judgment left in me. Just distance. Earned and protected. I stood up, slow and deliberate. My knees cracked, a soft reminder that we weren't those girls anymore. Vanessa didn't move. She watched me walk toward the kitchen, refill my mug from the carafe. The cinnamon scent had faded. Now it was just coffee. Bitter, quiet, real. I'm not asking for an apology, I said without turning around. I'm asking for space, respect, and an end to the performance. Behind me a chair creaked. Then stillness again. You really bought this place just to prove a point, she asked. I turned, met her eyes. No, I said. I bought it because peace costs something. And I was finally willing to pay. She looked down. Her hands clasped, knuckles pale. I'll tell them, she said. About the bankruptcy lie. About the house. I didn't smile, just nodded. And the other stuff, I asked. The name dropping. The business comments, I'll stop, she said. Then quietly, I'll try. That was all. No promises, no grand gestures. She stood. Smoothed her skirt, walked to the door. At the frame, she paused. This place, it really is beautiful, she said. I know, I replied. It's mine, And I meant every syllable. She left without slamming the door. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't have to. I stepped onto the porch. The wind had picked up slightly, just enough to stir the pine needles across the steps. Somewhere on the lake, a boat motor purred low and far. I sat on the swing. The one she once said she'd find peace on. And maybe she still could. Just not without earning it. The breeze cooled my skin. The coffee warmed my hands. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like second place. I just felt like myself. 2 weeks later, we gathered again. But this time at my house. The lake house. Mine. Lena was the first to arrive, holding a glass bowl of quinoa salad and a bottle of wine. She kissed my cheek and whispered, "Ready for the encore." I smiled. No stage this time. The cousins trickled in next, Melissa, then Jordan and his twins. The adults wore light linen, the kids barefoot with wet curls from lake water. Deviled eggs lined the center island. A blueberry pie waited in the fridge. I hadn't burned anything. Outside, the swing didn't creak. Inside, the music was soft, an old folk playlist my mother used to hum in the kitchen. At 6:18, Vanessa walked in. No heels, no sunglasses, no fanfare. She carried a lemon pie in a brown paper bag. Set it down on the counter like it weighed more than it did. Her eyes met mine. I gave a nod. Neutral, measured. Enough. We didn't rehearse this part. We didn't need to. We waited until the dishes were nearly done. Until the children had moved outside with popsicles and bubble wands. Until the evening settled into that golden lull when even whispers feel loud. Vanessa stood near the mantel. One hand at her side, the other brushing invisible lint from her dress. "I'd like to say something," she began. No one interrupted. Not even Mom, who had just started to refill the lemonade pitcher. Vanessa's voice didn't shake, but her fingers curled slightly at the edges. "I made a mistake. A few, actually." She looked at me once. Didn't linger. "I misread some paperwork and assumed things I had no right to. Worse than that, I chose to humiliate someone I should have protected." Aunt Carla looked down at her napkin. Uncle Daniel leaned back, eyes locked on her. "I let envy talk louder than truth," Vanessa continued. "I saw my sister's strength and mistook it for threat. And instead of celebrating her, I tried to cut her down." The room stayed still. One cousin cleared their throat. No one gasped this time. Vanessa's last words came softer. "I lied. I know that now. And I'm sorry for what I said and how I said it." She didn't cry, she didn't beg. She stepped back. Saturday down. No applause, no forgiveness offered aloud. But someone passed her a napkin. Someone else reached for the lemon pie. I didn't stand up after she finished. Didn't pull her into a hug or say, "It's okay." Because it wasn't. But something had shifted. Not loud, just present. Mom approached me in the kitchen later, wearing that soft apron with embroidered lavender sprigs. "I had no idea," she said quietly, slicing pie. "I wish I'd asked more questions." I didn't respond right away. The pie server clinked against the glass dish. Then I said, "You wanted peace." "I did too." She nodded. "We all did. But sometimes silence isn't peace. It's just fear." Outside, Lena helped the kids string lanterns across the deck rail. Uncle Daniel rinsed dishes in the sink, humming some forgotten tune. No one asked me why I bought the house. No one needed to. Later, as the light dipped orange and gold, Vanessa brought her plate to the kitchen. Without a word, she rolled up her sleeves. I handed her a towel. Not because I had to, but because for once she didn't expect it. She scrubbed the blueberry pie dish. I rinsed. No small talk. No makeup running down her cheeks. Just two women sisters, shoulder to shoulder in a kitchen they both never thought would be mine. And yet here we were. Later, after the dishes were done and the kids had gone home sticky with sugar and sun, Lena and I took our mugs to the porch. The swing didn't creak this time. It just swayed gently, like even it had exhaled. "You okay?" she asked, nudging my shoulder. Not angry anymore, I said, surprised to hear myself mean it. We watched the lake. A shimmer of silver where the dock lights had just flickered on. You could have humiliated her back, Lena said. I thought you might. I shook my head. Number. That's her game. A pause. I just needed to show them who I really was. She looked at me. And who is that? Someone steady. Someone no longer performing quietness for other people's comfort. I guess I'm someone who doesn't need an audience, I said. Inside, the soft hum of the dishwasher faded. Vanessa had left already, quietly. But she took her plate to the sink. She thanked me for the food. She hugged Mom without a camera in sight. That was new. The porch light buzzed above us. Lena stretched her legs. So what now? I looked around at the lake house. Mine now. Not as a trophy, not as revenge, but as a boundary. We use this place differently, I said. No more secrets, no more stage plays, just truth. Lena raised her mug to the quiet correction. And I raised mine back. The house was still when everyone left. Plates rinsed, chairs pushed in. The scent of lemon and cinnamon lingered in the air like a memory that chose to stay. I turned off the porch light. Then the kitchen. Each switch clicked like punctuation on a sentence I never thought I'd finish. There was no triumphant music. No one left clapping. Just the hum of the fridge and the way my own bare feet felt solid against the wood floor. I passed the swing on my way in. Still. Unoccupied. But not empty. It had held something today. Something heavier than any secret we'd carried, a chance to do things differently. On the counter, a note. Vanessa's handwriting. I'll tell them. All of it. Thank you for not slamming the door. No signature, no emojis. Just that. I folded it in half and slid it into the drawer next to the teaspoons. Not because I needed to save it, but because for the first time her words didn't feel like decoration. I poured the last of the lemonade into a glass. Took it out back. Saturday on the steps. The stars were coming in slow, one by one. No rush. No spotlight. Just presence. Like me. And for once my name wasn't something whispered behind hands. It was just mine. It's been 6 months. And no one's brought up the bankruptcy since. That's how I know it worked. Not the lake house, not the confrontation. But the silence I chose to keep afterward. Vanessa did what she said she would. At Thanksgiving, she stood beside the apple pie and told our relatives she got it wrong. No one clapped. But no one walked away either. That's legacy. Not the applause. The pause. The way people lean in when your name comes up and they hesitate before judging. I didn't correct the gossip. I just lived past it. The lake house is mine. Still is, but it doesn't feel like leverage anymore. I let the kids jump off the dock. Let Uncle Daniel grill burgers until they're charred black. Let Mom bring her folding chairs and talk about rhubarb like nothing ever broke. Vanessa comes too. Not every time. But enough. She doesn't sit on the swing anymore, she helps clean up. Once I caught her scraping plates into the compost bin, humming softly to herself. She doesn't apologize again. I don't ask her to. Forgiveness didn't come in a speech. It came in that quiet hour after dinner when she sat across from me and didn't try to explain. Some wounds don't close with closure. They just stop bleeding when you stop scratching. I've started hosting workshops here. Nothing big. Just a few women each month, creatives, business owners, women who've had their names bent in other people's mouths. We don't talk about revenge. We talk about reclaiming space. The lake reflects everything quietly. It holds no bias. It just lets you see what's already there. Sometimes I sit out on the dock after they leave, feet in the water, watching the horizon curl. And I think I didn't win. I didn't lose. I rewrote what was mine. No spotlight, no toast. Just a swing that no longer creaks when I sit in it. And a name that finally belongs to me again. The last sound I remember that night wasn't anyone's voice. It was the hush of the lake against the dock, steady as if nothing had ever been broken. Sometimes justice doesn't look like punishment. It looks like peace earned, not offered. And in families, peace often begins when someone chooses to stop repeating the same story. Maybe we don't fix the past by fighting it. Maybe we fix it by building something new on top of it and inviting people in slowly. If this story brought something back to you, an old wound, a quiet strength, I hope you'll share it. You never know who needs to hear that they're not alone. Where are you listening from? Has anyone ever mistaken your silence for weakness? Drop your thoughts below and subscribe to Sophia's Revenge Stories for more stories of quiet justice and lasting legacy.